You couldn't touch me, which I didn't like. If you simply did that to me, it would be really awkward. That bothers me. It's kind of sick, and I'm not sure what another man should be doing with that woman. The greatest comedy superstars weren't always in agreement. Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor, the pioneering king of stand-up, once engaged in a bitter rivalry. Behind the scenes, friction, jealousy, and betrayal tore the two titans apart, despite fans' assumption that they respected one another. It's finally becoming clear why Pryor detested Eddie Murphy so much. Make sure you have a thorough understanding of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy before delving into their alleged bitter rivalry. Richard Pryor wasn't your average stand-up comedian who recited jokes to get a brief round of applause. He was a groundbreaking voice who altered the fundamental notion of what comedy was capable of. Previously, humor was not a means of escape or diversion. Truth was at issue. He stood on stage and narrated tales that were laden with historical significance, personal suffering, and the realities of black life in America. Yes, he made people laugh, but he also forced them to face hard truths. Because his comedy served as a mirror, viewers were able to see the imperfections of society, their own biases, and the human condition in all of its complex paradoxes. Pryor made it clear early in his career that he had no intention of playing it safe. He decided to share his soul at a period when many comedians relied on imitations, light banter, or slapstick. He didn't avoid subjects that others deemed too frank, too intimate, or too risky from a political standpoint. Institutional inequality, racism, police violence, drug abuse, poverty, and broken families. These weren't incidental parts of his performance. They served as its skeleton. Before the unpleasantness of reality, they managed to make it not only bearable, but also humorous and important. He was brilliant at striking a mix between humor and grief. Pryor was unparalleled in his ability to transform suffering into art. He endured hardships that may have destroyed a different man, but he turned them into the material that brought him millions of people together. He was open about his struggles with drugs, his turbulent relationships, and his careless way of living. Rather than concealing these imperfections, he made them the focal point. His stories didn't only make the audience chuckle. They sensed his weakness. They understood the bravery required to take the stage and own up to one's shortcomings, to admit failure, and to turn humiliation into strength. Pryor was relatable in a manner that very few actors could ever be because of his unvarnished honesty. Richard Pryor was more than just a comedian by the 1970s. He was a force. The genre of comedy itself was changing, shifting from clean gags to narrative, social criticism, and introspection. That change was spearheaded by Pryor. In addition to stand-up, he had an impact on television, movies, and the larger cultural discourse. His albums, such as Is It Something I Said and That Nigger's Crazy, were more than just comedies. They were records of a moment, cultural snapshots that encapsulated the spirit, contradictions, and turmoil of America during a period of profound social transformation. Pryor broke down the boundaries between the audience and the performer on stage. He didn't portray himself as a well-trained performer with all the answers. He portrayed himself as a person. He faltered. He contradicted himself. He introduced personalities and voices that exposed the ridiculousness of both white and black America. He was able to go between scathing political criticism and personal admissions of his own shortcomings with ease. His comedy was particularly potent because it combined the political and the personal. He was more than just a crowd pleaser. By making them view reality from a viewpoint they might not have otherwise considered, he was educating them. His racial critique was especially revolutionary. Pryor drew attention to the contradiction of American society, which exalted black culture while depreciating black life and sought assimilation from black people while denying them equality. He did it while laughing, but there was always truth, pain, and rage underneath the humor. He, in a sense, gave expression to annoyances that many people felt but were afraid to express out. He didn't mince words. His audience was not reassured that everything was all right by him. Rather, even if it hurt, he forced them to face reality. Pryor's genius, however, extended beyond the theater. His impact was felt in television and movies, where he frequently wrote content that defied convention and pushed limits. Whether it was his semi-autobiographical picture, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, his buddy comedy with Gene Wilder, or his partnerships with Mel Brooks and Blazing Saddles, Pryor showed that his voice could not be made to stand up on its own. He told stories in a variety of media and always carried the same unapologetically honest message with him. His personal life was, of course, just as turbulent as his comedy. He almost died of addiction on multiple occasions. His relationships were erratic and frequently harmful. During a drug binge in 1980, he famously set himself on fire. This could have been the end of his life, but instead it became another part of the unvarnished tale he told audiences. Even this near-fatal catastrophe became material for him to make jokes about, which made people both laugh and cringe. Few artists could remain humorous in the face of such gloom. Pryor, however, did. His capacity to transform his most painful experiences into enduring works of art was both his gift and his burden. Pryor has had an incalculable influence on comedy as a whole. He paved the way for all of the great comedians who followed, including Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, and Chris Rock. He demonstrated that comedy could be personal without being conceited, political without being didactic, and intellectual without being pretentious. He provided opportunities for comedians of color, demonstrating that their voices not only merited recognition, but also had the power to completely transform the comedy business. Richard Pryor changed the definition of humor, which is why he is still regarded as a legend. He replaced comedy's polish and respectability with urgency, sincerity, and vulnerability. The very things that were destroying society were made fun of by him. By doing this, he provided them with a method of processing pain that they might not have otherwise considered. He wasn't joking around. He was transforming audiences, igniting discussions, and constructing bridges. His legacy lives on because of this. He was a cultural force who moved people, not just a man who made them laugh. What about Eddie Murphy? He made an electrifying debut on the comedy scene in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Murphy blasted onto the stage with a confidence and polish that seemed to indicate he was bound for greatness. Even if Richard Pryor had built his legacy during years of hardship in tiny venues, perfecting his craft through suffering and unvarnished honesty, with only a raised eyebrow and a cunning smile, he could command a room. He was young, bold, daring, and incredibly skilled. In contrast to earlier times, Murphy did not have to work for decades to gain fame. He rose quickly, almost dizzyingly. He had already become well known by his early 20s, and his face was a fixture in both movie theaters and television screens. Eddie Murphy couldn't be slowly discovered by the world. Rather, he appeared fully fledged, launching into the national spotlight with an irresistible enthusiasm. Murphy's big break came when he was hired at the age of 19 for Saturday Night Live in 1980. SNL was in trouble at the time, with its founding cast members gone, and many pundits foresaw its demise. However, Eddie Murphy brought the show back to life virtually by himself. Because they combined scathing social criticism with absurd humor, his characters, Buckwheat, Gumby, and Mr. Robinson, were instantly recognizable. He had the unique ability to both create characters that were comedic gold on their own and lampoon American culture. Considering how young he was, his confidence on live air was astounding. He was more than a sketch artist. He was the focal point of the performance since he owned the stage. Murphy made a smooth transition from Saturday Night Live to the film industry, which he would later dominate. In addition to launching his film career, his co-starring role in 48 Horrors 1982 with Nick Nolte effectively invented the contemporary buddy cop genre. Beverly Hills Cop solidified his position as a box office titan just 2 years later. Murphy was no longer merely a comedian. He had the ability to open movies to large crowds and was a true movie star. He was one of Hollywood's most bankable names by the middle of the 1980s, which is almost unheard of for a stand-up comedian. His comedic approach differed greatly from Pryor's. Murphy glistened with vitality, characters, and impressions, whereas Pryor used the suffering of his own life and social criticism to engage audiences. His ability to effortlessly transition between voices, accents, and identities made his stand-up acts seem like one-man shows. His best work was on his programs, Raw 1987 and Delirious 1983. Fearless, leather-clad, and dominant venues with tens of thousands of spectators. His stage appearance exuded confidence, and he was a consummate performer, bursting with personality. Murphy's act was built around his impressions. He was able to hilariously and accurately imitate famous people, relatives, or cultural cliches, leaving audiences in stitches. Murphy turned mimicry into an art form, whether he was mimicking the swagger of Elvis Presley, the sweat-soaked stage antics of James Brown, or even making fun of Richard Pryor himself. But it wasn't just the precision of his perceptions that set his act apart. It was the storyline he poured into them. When filtered through Murphy's enthusiasm, voice, and facial expressions, even the most straightforward story became hilarious. Murphy also symbolized a new form of black celebrity in America at the time. Pryor had broken down hurdles to lay the groundwork. But Murphy entered and took center stage with a level of ease never seen before. At the height of his career, he was the most paid actor in Hollywood, demonstrating that he did more than just excel. Murphy's ascent marked a change during a period when black entertainers still had few possibilities. He wasn't limited to supporting parts or black roles. He was the movie's main character, the main attraction at the box office, and the star. Murphy's appeal, however, was not restricted to a single demographic. Few comedians were able to transcend barriers like him because of his charisma and universal wit. His films and performances attracted audiences of all ages, colors, and origins. His self-assurance was contagious, and he was approachable by combining witty humor with outrageous actions. He was more than just a comic for one demographic. For the general public, he was an idol. Naturally, the rapid success was accompanied by scrutiny. Despite being clever, Murphy's comedy was frequently controversial. His early stand-up acts featured content that would later come under fire for using stereotypes and homophobic epithets. Murphy later admitted the shortcomings of previous acts, stating that some of his gags were more reflective of adolescent conceit than of critical analysis. But even this dispute was unable to lessen his influence. His impact on comedy was well established, and his talent was indisputable. Eddie Murphy had become a household name by the late 1980s. Few performers had ever mastered comedy, television, and film all at once, but he had. His career path was legendary, the kind of ascent that most comedians could only imagine. Murphy was the entertainer who triumphed with charisma, self-assurance, and pure personality power, whereas Pryor had been the revolutionary who revealed truth through suffering. Nowhere was the complicated relationship between Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy more obvious than in comedy, which has always been an art form based on both adoration and rivalry. At first glance, the two individuals appeared to be similar in that they were both black comedians who made their mark in a largely white field and attracted notice for their talent. Deep respect and a simmering competitiveness that neither man ever really addressed were present beneath the surface of their relationship, though. Richard Pryor was an absolute hero to Eddie Murphy. He watched Pryor's routines, took in his delivery, and admired his boldness long before Murphy himself became well known. As the pioneer, Pryor demonstrated that a black comedian could not only rule the stage, but also change American culture by speaking the truth. Murphy never forgot that debt. Murphy continued to honor Pryor even when his own popularity eclipsed his in scope and speed. He called Pryor the greatest in interviews, stand-up shows, and public appearances, a label he never claimed for himself. Even though he was incredibly successful, Murphy believed that Pryor had to sit on the comedic throne before Murphy could sit on it. Pryor's appreciation, however, wasn't quite as unrestrained. Pryor, who was known for his caustic honesty both on and off stage and was never one to give unmerited praise, was undoubtedly aware of Murphy's abilities. His charisma, adaptability, and capacity to fill venues with boisterous audiences were all undeniable. Pryor, however, is said to have questioned whether Murphy's comedy has the same societal weight and unvarnished honesty that had characterized his. Pryor's approach was centered on bringing his suffering, prejudice, addiction, and strained relationships to light. Comedy, to him, was entertainment masquerading as protest. Murphy, on the other hand, was the star, captivating audiences with his persona, impressions, and exaggerated presence. There was an underlying tension between the two because of their different approaches. Murphy looked up to Pryor, but Pryor wasn't sure that Murphy was worthy of being considered his heir. It wasn't just whether someone could be witty, Pryor thought. The question was whether their humor was important. Did Pryor's scathing monologues on race and injustice push boundaries, as did Murphy's humor about pop culture, celebrities, and family? Did Murphy make viewers face the harsh realities of society? Or did he provide them with a way out? Pryor was an advocate of deep-cut comedy. Murphy, however, was a virtuoso of comedy that provided large-scale entertainment. Pryor believed that although both strategies had merit, they were not on an equal footing. Style was not the only factor in this split. It was a generational issue. Pryor has been grinding in small bars for years, frequently dealing with racial epithets, hostile crowds, and personal demons. His humor sprang from hardship and was honed by suffering. Murphy, on the other hand, became well known practically immediately. He didn't have to fight obscurity for decades. By the age of 25, he was a Hollywood force and a star. That quick climb would have seemed too effortless, too seamless to Pryor. He believed that comedy should be gained through hardships rather than given away with accolades and lucrative contracts. Sometimes the stress showed itself subtly. Pryor would express his doubts in his remarks, raising doubts about whether Murphy had something important to contribute. Murphy, meanwhile, never retaliated. Rather, he intensified his appreciation, recognizing Pryor as the trailblazer who enabled his own career. Murphy spoke to Pryor with respect, even when his health started to deteriorate in the late 1980s and early 1990s as a result of multiple sclerosis. Even though Pryor appeared to keep Murphy at bay, Murphy seemed unable to view Pryor as a rival. The two comedians actually represented distinct periods of black comedy. During the volatile 1970s, Pryor was the revolutionary, the voice of grief, rage, and candor. He dismantled obstacles, made Hollywood take notice, and gave voice to long-silenced experiences. In contrast, Murphy was the 1980s crossover phenomenon. He expanded on Pryor's work, but he took humor to the next level, playing to packed houses and starring in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of movies. He made himself approachable to audiences who might have been uneasy with Pryor's harsher realities by bringing vitality, refinement, and mass appeal. However, that does not imply that Pryor completely disregarded Murphy. He must have known in his heart that Murphy had a tremendous talent. However, Murphy might have seemed like a safer, less risky form of comedy to a man who distinguished himself by pushing boundaries. The firebrand was Pryor. The showman was Murphy. Although the analogy was unavoidable, it was never quite appropriate. Naturally, the irony is that Murphy had no intention of overthrowing Pryor. He wished to pay tribute to him. Even now, while talking about his influences, Murphy puts Pryor at the top, admitting that Eddie Murphy wouldn't exist without him. Their friendship is made much more intriguing by Murphy's quick rise to fame and his humility. A situation in which the teacher was not persuaded that the student had followed the same route. Yet the student held the teacher in high regard. This is the most crucial section, so keep your eyes on the screen. The conflict between Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor. Eddie Murphy took on Harlem Nights, one of the most difficult assignments of his career, in 1989. Murphy was completely behind the camera for the first time, not only as the film's lead, but also as its writer, director, and creative force. His goal was lofty. In what would have been a historic partnership, he sought to unite two comedy legends, Red Fox and Richard Pryor. It was the meeting of legends on paper. Fox, the king of television comedy with decades of expertise and a keen, irreverent edge. And Pryor, the pioneering voice of truth and unvarnished honesty. The possibilities looked endless with Murphy leading the charge. However, what started out as a dream project swiftly turned into a heated and frequently uncomfortable battleground. On set, Murphy, who was just out of his 20s, was making decisions. Riding the wave of his quick ascent via Saturday Night Live, popular movies, and arena-filling stand-up shows. He was Hollywood's new golden boy. He was polished, driven, and charismatic enough to dominate a set. However, he also exuded the youthful confidence and energy that, to more seasoned veterans like Pryor, might occasionally come across as arrogance. In contrast, Richard Pryor was accustomed to the demands of celebrity. However, he was also a man whose spirit and health were deteriorating. The fire that previously characterized his improvisational genius was fading by the late 1980s as multiple sclerosis started to take a toll on his body. Pryor had always taken a very improvised and intimate approach to comedy. When he had the opportunity to experiment, push limits, and infuse each line with the unadulterated vitality that came from living experience, he flourished. That freedom vanished on the stiff, strictly regimented set of Harlem Nights. There was a noticeable tension between the two men. The veteran, Pryor, disliked being told what to do by someone he perceived as a child. Even though he was a child with the entire world at his feet, Pryor was not very involved, according to set reports. He would show there, give his lines as casually as possible, and go. The project failed to deliver on its promises of spark, alchemy, and electrifying comedic chemistry. According to friends and coworkers, Pryor probably found it upsetting to see Murphy, who had formerly been a fan and admirer, now have a prominent position in Hollywood. It might have been a harsh pill to watch the industry declare Murphy the new comedy king, since it highlighted the passing of time, the shift of eras, and the brittleness of Pryor's own legacy. There was more to Pryor's misgivings about Murphy than age and expertise. According to reports, he thought Murphy was a polished mainstream version of the unvarnished, risky humor that Pryor had invented. Murphy had the energy to control an audience, inhabit personalities, and mimic voices. Was his depth the same, though? Did he have the same courage as Pryor to face the unsettling realities of addiction, race, and life's darker sides? Murphy was clearly gifted, but Pryor didn't think he had the same cultural weight, the same visceral edge, or the same courage to sacrifice himself for laughter. Murphy's comedy was like a spotlight, while Pryor's was like a knife. Pryor believed that although both types were valuable, they were not on an equal footing. Murphy probably found the experience to be both annoying and educational. He approached the set with a mixture of cautious awe and admiration for Pryor, and he never treated him disrespectfully. He was familiar with the luminaries he was collaborating with, and he saw the fine line that must be drawn between leading a project and respecting the artists in front of him. But the conflict was unavoidable. It was more of a clash of times, fashions, and expectations than a personal grudge. Pryor's cynicism and Murphy's conviction clashed, creating a set full of unsaid tension, lost chances, and untapped promise. Murphy never wavered in his admiration for Pryor, even in the face of professional challenges. Murphy referred to Pryor as the best of all time even after the problematic production of Harlem Nights and even after his passing in 2005. Both in public and privately, he admitted that Eddie Murphy would not have existed without Pryor. What it meant to be a black comedian in Hollywood was defined by Pryor, who had opened doors and made room. That was the cornerstone of Murphy's quick ascent, and he never forgot it. However, such admiration was never quite returned by Pryor. He never officially acknowledged Murphy as the heir to his comedy throne, nor did he ever announce him to be his successor. Disdain was not the issue. It had to do with philosophy, taste, and principle. Danger, unvarnished honesty, and pushing the limits of what viewers could tolerate and comprehend have always been themes in Pryor's comedy. Despite his brilliance, Murphy played a different game. A game that sold out theaters all over the world, packed arenas, and pleased the crowds. By Pryor's definition, that game was less revolutionary, less dangerous, and ultimately less revolutionary. As a result, The Harlem Nights routine evolved to represent the intricate relationship between two generations of comedians. It symbolized the meeting point of respect and bitterness, of youthful aspiration and seasoned prudence, of unvarnished, unadulterated reality and polished, easily comprehensible amusement. It was more than just a personality conflict. It was a debate between comedy theories on how humor could define legacies and impact culture. How do you feel about Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor's feud? Please share your thoughts in the space provided below. We hope this video has been useful to you. If you enjoy it, remember to subscribe to the channel, share it, and give a like. I appreciate you viewing, and I hope to see you in the upcoming videos. Farewell.